Sadao looked up from his book. He was in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. So children already have been told that there was the arrival of a man in uniform. And the person was wearing what kind of uniform? He was in military uniform. And seeing to him, Hannah was really quite terrified and dismayed. She had thought that the servants must have gone and they would have reported the matter to police, and that is why the police and military men have started falling in order to make the inquiry about the prisoner of war. So this is how she was really quite terrified. And then in the time being, the person had reached to that particular portion of the house where Dr. Sadao was seated, and Hannah just pointed out at him and referred the matter to Sadao that somebody has come to talk to you. So this is from where we are going to start from now. So by the time Dr. Sadao had been busy reading his book, so he must have looked up. He was in his office. So Dr. Sadao was seated in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for southern sunshine. So his office had got two entrances. One must have been connected to one of the rooms, and the other, opening the other door or the other partition of the room, was open to the garden for southern sunshine. So there Dr. Sadao was seated. कि आपने क्या देखा कि वो जब सैनिक वहाँ पे आया तो उसको देख करके हाना डर गई, और जब डॉक्टर सदाओ के पास वो पहुँचा तो उस समय डॉक्टर सदाओ एक बुक पढ़ रहे थे और उन्होंने ऊपर की तरफ अपनी गर्दन उठा करके देखा. तो यहाँ पे बताया जा रहा है कि जिस ऑफिस में डॉक्टर सदाओ बैठे हुए थे उस ऑफिस के दो एंट्रेंसेस थे, जिसमें एक एंट्रेंस वो गार्डन की तरफ खुलता था सदर्न सनशाइन के लिए, तो वहीं डॉक्टर सदाओ बैठे हुए थे. व्हाट इज इट? ही आस्क्ड द मैसेंजर एंड देन ही रोज. So seeing to the military uniform of the messenger, Dr. Sadao stood up. He just wanted to know what the matter was. You are to come to the palace, the man said. So the messenger said that Dr. Sadao is required to visit the palace, that Dr. Sadao has to visit the palace. The old general is in pain again. So the reason was that there was some problem with the general. So already you have been told that the general had been in some kind of medical emergency for which Dr. Sadao had been providing him with the treatment. So the problem had cropped up again and that is why Dr. Sadao was required to go there. तो उसने ये बात बताई कि जनरल की तबीयत नहीं ठीक है और आपको जल्दी से जल्दी वहाँ पहुँचना होगा. ये बात आपने देखी तो इससे उनको थोड़ा सा सुकून मिला कि चलो कोई खतरे वाली बात नहीं है. Oh, Hannah breathed. Is that all? All, the messenger exclaimed. Is it not enough? So Hannah just wanted to have the confirmation from the messenger whether it was all, whether this was the only matter for which he had turned up there. कि Hannah उससे जानना चाहती थी कि भैया बस इतनी ही बात है ना और तो कुछ नहीं है. तो the messenger said yes, definitely that's all. Is it not enough? Means am I supposed to say something else? कि कुछ और भी कहना है मुझे? Indeed it is, she replied. So Hannah said no, it is sufficient. I am very sorry. When Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen but doing nothing. So when Dr. Sadao came to say goodbye to Hannah while he had been proceeding towards the palace, Hannah was in the kitchen, but she was not doing anything. The children were asleep and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from work. So at this juncture of time when Dr. Sadao came to say goodbye to Hannah, Hannah was really quite anxious. Hannah was really in a great anxiety. She did not know what she has to do. She was standing in the kitchen, but she was not able to do any of the household works. So she was more exhausted out of fright than the work. कि हाना जो है वो काम से नहीं थकी हुई थी बल्कि वो डर से थकी हुई थी. वो डर से परेशान थी कि डर के मारे कुछ काम करने का मन नहीं कर रहा था. इस तरीके की सिचुएशन वहाँ पे आ गई थी. तो हियर हाना जस्ट वांटेड टू डिस्कस समथिंग विद डॉक्टर सदाव एंड शी जस्ट वांटेड टू गिव हिम एन एडवाइस दैट समहाउ ही हैज टू गेट रिड ऑफ दैट patient, somehow he has to get rid of that prisoner of war. So this is probably Hannah wanted to speak to Dr. Sadao at this moment of time. Okay. I thought they had come to arrest you, she said. So Hannah just told her worries to Dr. Sadao and she said that she had thought that probably the military men had come to arrest him as the matter might have been leaked to them. कि उसने डॉक्टर सदाओ से कहा कि मुझे तो ये लगा कि शायद ये लोग आपको पकड़ने आए हैं क्योंकि इन्हें सारी बात पता चल गई. He gazed down into her anxious eyes. So Dr. Sadao just looked into the eyes of Hannah and he was able to understand how terrified, how anxious Hannah had been. I must get rid of this man for your sake, he said, in distress. So Dr. Sadao was himself in distress. Dr. Sadao was himself in a great mental anxiety. He was himself in a great tension. And he just assured Hannah that for her sake, he is going to get rid of that person. डॉक्टर सदाव जो खुद भी बहुत डिस्ट्रेस में थे, बहुत परेशानी में थे, उन्होंने हाना को एक एश्योरेंस दी कि ठीक है, तुम्हारे लिए मैं इस आदमी से कैसे भी छुटकारा पाऊंगा, मैं कैसे भी इस आदमी को यहाँ से भगाने की कोशिश करूंगा. Sadao goes to see the general. So now Dr. Sadao goes to see the general. Of course, the general said weakly. So now from here you can see there is a change of scene in your book. So in the meantime, in the gap, in the interval, Dr. Sadao must have told the general everything that had happened over there. कि उन्होंने जनरल को कॉन्फिडेंस में ले करके, और जनरल का उनके ऊपर बहुत भरोसा भी था, तो उन्होंने जनरल को सारी बातें बता दी कि देखिए ऐसे ऐसे इस तरीके से हुआ. तो जो डॉक्टर सदाओ ने बताया उसकी रिप्लाई आप यहाँ देख रहे हैं जनरल के द्वारा. ऑफ कोर्स द जनरल सेड वीकली. So in this way here, from the tone of the sentence, it is clear that Dr. Sadao has reported the entire matter to the general, and now the general says, of course he can understand his situation. The general said weakly, I understand fully. So he had got a full faith in Dr. Sadao, and he knew that Dr. Sadao could never be a traitor. So whatever he would have done, definitely he would have done for the sake of mercy. As a man is merciful, so it is possible that he may not be able to control his sentiments of mercy, and sometimes he may also come forward to help an enemy. That is what the general was able to understand. But that is because I once took a degree in Princeton, so few Japanese have. So here the general says that he took his degree from Princeton, that he had also been abroad, and he understands this kind of sentiment. So he is in the position to realize what Dr. Sadao would have felt when he had tried to save the American. कि उन्होंने अमेरिकन को बचाया, तो वो अमेरिका में थे, तो कहीं ना कहीं उनको अमेरिकन से कुछ लगाव हो सकता है कि जिसकी वजह से वो अपने आप को बचाने से रोक नहीं पाए उस आदमी को. तो जनरल ने कहा कि ये बात मैं समझ सकता हूँ क्योंकि मैं भी एब्रॉड रहा हूँ, मैंने भी प्रिंसटन से डिग्री ली है, लेकिन ये बाकी जैपनीज़ नहीं समझेंगे, क्योंकि बाकी जैपनीज़ इस सेंटिमेंट को नहीं समझ सकते कि अगर आप कहीं अपने देश से बाहर रहे हैं, तो अगर वहाँ के लोगों ने कभी आपके साथ में दोस्ती निभाई है, आपके साथ में मित्रता निभाई है, आपकी मदद की है, तो आपको उनसे एक अटैचमेंट हो जाएगा, और उन लोगों के दोबारा मिलने पर आप उनकी मदद करने से अपने आप को रोक नहीं पाएंगे. तो एज डॉक्टर सदाव हैड बीन इन अमेरिका, डेफिनेटली he would have received some help from the Americans in his odds. So now when he saw an American in odd, he was not able to control himself from helping him. तो ऐसा जनरल सोच रहा था कि शायद ये वजह रही हो कि जिसके लिए डॉक्टर सदाव ने उस अमेरिकन की मदद की. तो खैर उसने उस पर कुछ रिएक्ट नहीं किया, उसने कुछ उस पर गलत बात नहीं बोली कि डॉक्टर सदाव को जो है पनिशमेंट मिलेगा या क्या होगा, ऐसा उसने कुछ नहीं कहा. Care nothing for the man, Excellency, Sadao said. So Dr. Sadao just showed his concern. He just expressed his concern. You can say it like this, that Dr. Sadao expressed his concern to the general, and he said that he does not care for the man. He said, Your Excellency, I do not care for the man. I haven't got any kind of attachment with the man. But having operated on him with such success, now I feel, here you can see ... So he must have wanted to say, now I feel that if the man is allowed to die, definitely it would be a wastage of my labor and efforts. So what Dr. Sadao said? कि मैं उसके लिए फ़िक्रमंद नहीं हूँ, मैं उसकी जान बचाने के लिए कोई कंसर्न नहीं हूँ, ना मुझे कोई इससे अटैचमेंट है, लेकिन हाँ इतनी क्रिटिकल कंडीशन में मैंने उसका ऑपरेशन किया और उसका ऑपरेशन सक्सेसफुल रहा, तो अब मुझे ये लगता है कि क्या उसको फिर से मार देने के लिए मैंने उसका ऑपरेशन किया, ऐसा शायद वो कहना चाह रहे हो, जो कि ये ... से यहाँ पे रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है. येस येस, द जनरल सेड, इट ओनली मेक्स मी फील यू इंडिस्पेंसिबल टू मी. सो द जनरल सेड येस येस. He said that definitely this is the reason, that you are such a perfect surgeon, and it is your art of surgery that makes you indispensable to me. This is something on account of which you are essential to me. This is something on account of which you are required to be with me. कि ये जो तुम्हारी सर्जरी की आर्ट है, इसी वजह से तुम मेरे लिए इंडिस्पेंसिबल हो, तुम मेरे लिए एसेंशियल हो, और मैं तुम्हें कुछ होने नहीं दे सकता. Evidently you can save anyone, you are so skilled. So the general appreciated Dr. Sadao that he is really so skilled that he can save anybody. You say, you think I can stand one more such attack as I have had today? So here the general says that as per the advice of Dr. Sadao, the general is not in the condition that he would be able to withstand with any more attack of that kind. कि जनरल की कंडीशन इतनी क्रिटिकल है कि आज उसे जैसा अटैक पड़ा ऐसा अटैक अब वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा बस एक और बर्दाश्त कर सकता है, उसके बाद उससे ज़्यादा वो बर्दाश्त नहीं कर पाएगा. अगर ऐसे 2 अटैक और पड़ गए तो फिर जनरल का बचना नामुमकिन है. नॉट मोर देन वन सदाओ सेड. सो सदाओ सेड नॉट मोर देन वन, कि अब एक से ज़्यादा ऐसा अटैक आपके लिए अच्छा नहीं होगा, तो आपको भी अपनी हेल्थ पे ध्यान देना होगा. Then certainly, I can allow nothing to happen to you, the general said with anxiety. So here the general realized that his condition is really quite critical. And that is why he said that if my condition is so critical, I can allow nothing to happen to you. He said with anxiety. So however, all these things must have been a kind of light conversation, थोड़ा हंसी मजाक के टोन में कि अरे जब मेरी कंडीशन इतनी क्रिटिकल है तब अब तो मैं तुम्हें कुछ नहीं होने दे सकता वरना मेरी जान कौन बचाएगा. तो it might have been a light conversation also between the general and Dr. Sadao. His long pale Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. So now, on the face of the general, there was an expression of thought. It appeared as if the general had been in a deep meditation and thinking. कि जैसे जनरल के चेहरे को देख करके लग रहा था कि वो कुछ सोच रहा है, तो वो जरूर कुछ ऐसे सोच रहा होगा कि अब ये डॉक्टर सदाओ ने ऐसा काम कर लिया, अब इनको कैसे बचाया जाए. तो ही मस्ट हैव बीन बिजी थिंकिंग अबाउट व्हाट हैज टू बी डन इन ऑर्डर टू सेव डॉक्टर सदाओ. And in the meantime, what you have been told, his long pale Japanese face, that he had got a long and pale faded Japanese face. And that became expressionless. Now there was no expression on his face. That means that he must have been in some deep meditation. You cannot be arrested, the general said, closing his eyes. So ultimately the general had given his declaration that he is not going to arrest Dr. Sadao. And he said it while his eyes were still closed. Suppose you were condemned to death and the next day I had to have my operation. So the general just said in a light mood that suppose Dr. Sadao is condemned to death, कि मान लो डॉक्टर सदाओ को सजाए मौत दे दी जाए और अगले ही दिन जनरल का ऑपरेशन हो तो कौन उसको बचाएगा. तो जैसा कि मैंने बताया कि ये एक लाइट कन्वर्सेशन के फॉर्म में था, तो जनरल जो है ये थोड़ा सा हंसी मजाक के मूड में हो सकता है, कह रहा हो कि अच्छा तुमको हम फांसी दे दें और अगले दिन मुझको ही ऑपरेशन की ज़रूरत हो तो कौन मेरी ज़िंदगी बचाएगा, तो चलो ठीक है इसलिए मैं तुमको नहीं मारूंगा. तो ये केवल एक हंसी मजाक की बात है. तो इस तरीके से उसने जनरल ने ये बात कही. There are other surgeons, Excellency, Sadao suggested. So Dr. Sadao said that he must not be given that kind of a weightage because he is not the only surgeon that Japan has produced. There are many other surgeons who are more skilled than him. So Dr. Sadao was not that kind of a person who was going to pat on his own back कि अपने कोई शाबाश शाबाश कि अपने मुंह मिट्ठू मियाँ बनना कि self praise करना. तो that is what was not the habit of Dr. Sadao. There are other surgeons, Excellency. So he said that there are many other surgeons also in Japan. None I trust, the general replied. So the general said that he does not trust anybody. The best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. So he said that most of the most of the doctors have been trained by Germans and they would consider the operation successful even if I died. तो ये समझिए बड़ा ही मजाकिया टोन में ये चीज़ कही जा रही है कि here the general says that most of the surgeons in Japan have been trained by Germans and they would consider the operation to be successful even if I died. So if you remember that story, the Tiger King, you might be able to recall it to your mind that the king had died and yet the surgeons had declared that the operation was successful. They say the operation is successful, the king is dead. So that is the same kind of mentality with which the German surgeons have also been trained. That they are really so merciless that they are going to be concerned only about the diseased portion, कि वो डिजीज पोर्शन को निकाल देंगे और कह देंगे कि ऑपरेशन सक्सेसफुल है, आदमी मरे तो मर जाए। उन्होंने आदमी का ऑपरेशन थोड़ी ना किया है, उन्होंने तो उस रोग का ऑपरेशन किया है और रोग को उन्होंने ठीक कर दिया, रोग को हटा दिया। अब आदमी जो नहीं बचेगा तो उसके लिए वो क्या करें। तो दैट इज व्हाट दे माइट हैव सेड। I do not care for their point of view. He sighed. So the general sighed. He said, taking a deep breath, that he does not care for the viewpoint of other surgeons. It seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness with American sentimentality. So here the general wanted to say that so far as surgery is concerned, so in surgery, the German ruthlessness should be combined with American sentimentality. कि जो जर्मन रुथलेसनेस है, कि जर्मन रुथलेसनेस का मतलब कि उनका ऑपरेशन का तरीका जो है वो रुथलेस है, उनका ऑपरेशन का तरीका मर्सीलेस है। कि अगर उनको लगेगा कि हाँ ऑपरेशन करना है तो आदमी का हाथ पैर बांध देंगे, मुंह बांध देंगे और बिना उसको बेहोश किए ही उसको चीर फाड़ करके रख देंगे, वो चिल्लाए तो चिल्लाता रहे, जो खराब है उसको निकाल देंगे, भले दर्द से वो आदमी मर जाए। तो वो परफेक्ट होते हैं लेकिन उनकी सर्जरी रुथलेस है। और अमेरिकन ऑपरेशन का सिस्टम क्या है कि उसमें सेंटिमेंटेलिटी पाई जाएगी, उसमें केयर पाई जाएगी। भले वो ऑपरेशन उतना सक्सेसफुल ना हो लेकिन इतनी केयर वो आदमी को दे देंगे कि आप हॉस्पिटलाइज हुए तो आपके चारों तरफ इतनी अच्छी अच्छी इतनी खूबसूरत नर्सेज लगा दी जाएंगी कि आपका मन ही नहीं होगा कि आप ऑपरेशन से बाहर आइए। कि अगर आप मेदांता चले जाइए या आप ऐसी जगहों पे चले जाइए और एक बार अगर आप मेदांता में एडमिट हो जाइए तो जो वहाँ आपको फैसिलिटीज़ मिलेंगी, जो खूबसूरत नर्सेज आपको नर्स करेंगी कि आपका मन होगा कि यार ज़िंदगी तो बीमार होकर के ही अच्छा है, तो ऐसा आप सोचने लगेंगे। तो दैट इज़ what reflects American sentimentality. That is the kind of thing that you are going to find in American sentimentality, that you are just going to be taken care of with a great sentimentality, with a great care you are going to be nourished. कि भले आपकी बीमारी न ठीक हो लेकिन वो बीमारी के हाल में भी आपको ऐसा ट्रीटमेंट मिलेगा कि आपका मन ही नहीं होगा कि आप ठीक हो, आप चाहेंगे कि आप जिंदगी भर बीमार ही रहें। तो जनरल यहाँ पे कहना चाहता था कि जो जर्मन रुथलेसनेस है उसको क्या हम अमेरिकन सेंटिमेंटेलिटी से, कि जर्मन परफेक्शन है लेकिन वो परफेक्शन रुथलेस है, क्या उसको अमेरिकन सेंटिमेंटेलिटी के साथ में कंबाइन नहीं किया जा सकता है? और अगर ऐसा कर दिया जाए तो डेफिनेटली सर्जरी इज गोइंग टू बी परफेक्ट। I hope you would have been able to understand it. Then you could turn your prisoner over to execution, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. So the general has been saying all these things quite in a light mood. He is somewhat in a humorous mood, and he says that while he is in operation and while he is unconscious, he hopes that Dr. Sadao is not going to kill him. And afterwards, when he is all right, he would also not be having any problem in handing over his prisoner for execution. कि जब वो ठीक हो जाए तो उस प्रिजनर को एग्जीक्यूशन के लिए, यानी कि उसको मारने के लिए, एग्जीक्यूशन का मतलब कि कत्ल, उसके कत्ल के लिए उसको हैंड ओवर कर दिया जाएगा मिलिट्री को, उस प्रिजनर को। और जब डॉक्टर सदाओ ऑपरेशन कर रहे होंगे और जनरल बेहोश होगा तो डॉक्टर सदाओ जनरल को मारेंगे नहीं, इस वजह से कि जिसको डॉक्टर सदाओ ने इतनी मेहनत से बचाया, जनरल उसका एग्जीक्यूशन कराने की तैयारी कर रहा है। तो ये बात जनरल ने हंसी मजाक के टोन में बोली। The general laughed. He had an unusual sense of humor. So the general started laughing at it. He had an unusual sense of humor. He was quite a funny man. He was quite a humorous man. As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? So here the general has once again started talking about the ideology of surgery in Germany and in America. And he says that Dr. Sadao as a scientist and surgeon should try to combine both these arts. कि जो अमेरिकन सेंटिमेंटेलिटी है उसको जर्मन परफेक्शन के साथ में मिला दो तो सर्जरी परफेक्ट हो जाएगी। He asked, उसने पूछा कि can you not do it? Sadao smiled. I am not quite sure, he said. So Dr. Sadao said that he is not sure, but for your sake I would be willing to try, Excellency. But Dr. Sadao said that for the pleasure of general he may try to execute it. He may try to put his effort in doing so. He may try to put his effort in combining German perfection with American sentimentality. That is what Dr. Sadao said.